The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
This week on In the Loop.
We want to ensure that we are not admitting into our country the very threats our soldiers are fighting overseas.
Immigration backlash. President Trump's ban on immigrants from several majority Muslim countries sows confusion and protest at O'Hare Airport. Was it the wrong decision?
We're all humans. He shouldn't be banning certain specific groups or minorities.
And paychecks held hostage. Attorney General Madigan wants to keep state employees from getting paid until a budget deal is made. Can Governor Rauner stop her?
This is going to hurt working families, the good, hardworking employees of Illinois who deserve to be paid.
Plus, medical marijuana. Why the debate still rages in Illinois.
I've seen it change the life of so many patients over the years.
In its current form, it's a dangerous public health perception. I think that when you start calling something medical, it opens up a Pandora's box of perceptions.
Stay with us for these stories and much more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Chris Bury. For several days this week, protesters converged on O'Hare Airport and others across the country to oppose President Trump's ban on travel from 7 primarily Muslim countries. The president insists the restrictions are needed to keep Americans safe from terrorists. But protesters here in Chicago see the hastily enacted ban as an act of bigotry and incompetence. Hundreds of angry protesters rallied at O'Hare Airport after President Trump's immigration order suspended entries of refugees from certain countries for 120 days and barred Syrian refugees indefinitely. The news hit hard in Chicago, where Mayor Rahm Emanuel has declared his commitment to protecting immigrants in a sanctuary city. Emanuel and several aldermen joined protesters to show their support over the weekend. Carlos Ramirez Rosa is alderman of the 35th Ward.
It doesn't matter if you call God Christ, or you call God Buddha, or you call God Allah. We are all one people.
The ban blocks entry for citizens of 7 predominantly Muslim countries: Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Dozens of attorneys have been camped out at O'Hare, offering free legal assistance to families waiting for relatives.
We'll come back home.
Among them was Houston resident Wael Bougazia. He flew from Houston to meet his wife, who was returning from Libya and was connecting through Chicago. Despite having a green card, his wife was detained for further questioning.
There's no reason for them to deport her back. She has everything legally.
Bougazia, an American citizen, says the president's immigration order caught him by surprise.
I was shocked. I've been here since, 10 years old in America, so I'm 47 now, and it's shocking to me because I never thought this, we would have such ignorance, and I'm still shocked, and basically I'm American. I grew up here.
Alicia Fitz and Farhana Afezi were part of the group of attorneys assisting dozens of immigrants who've been detained at the airport.
As a Muslim American, I'm appalled by this. I'm here not only as an attorney, but as a Muslim American to help my fellow Americans.
Basically, we felt that we had to do something, and this is something that we're all passionate about, making sure the Constitution is upheld, and angry at what we're seeing our president do.
Illinois Attorney General Lisa Madigan has entered the fight. She joined 15 other attorneys general who call the ban unconstitutional, un-American, and unlawful. Chicago's Cardinal Blaise Supich also condemned the president's order. In a statement, he said, "This weekend proved to be a dark moment in U.S. history." Meanwhile, after being detained for more than 7 hours, Bougazia's wife was finally released and allowed to go home.
You can't ban people who have green cards. I mean, those people who come here legally, done things right, have families, their life is here in America. So if you're going to do it right. Don't punish those who who have done things right.
Illinois Governor Rauner has said little about the ban. His office did issue a statement saying the governor has been supportive of tightening the vetting process for Syrian refugees, but he's opposed to immigration bans that target any specific religion. Joining us now to further discuss the travel ban and more are journalist Marion Sobe, Jeff Holm, president of the Chicago Young Republicans, and Sylvia Puente, executive director for the Latino Policy Forum. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Hello.
So, Miriam, let me start with you. What do you think the significance of these protests that we've seen in Chicago and other cities are?
I think it's finally people are tired of the way things have been going, and this is the only option they have left to have their voices heard. You know, people have been speaking out for a long time over things that have been occurring in the political realm, but until they actually physically get out there, then people start to take notice.
Jeff, do you think the protests that we've seen in Chicago this week are justified?
You know, I think that, everybody here likes to call it a Muslim ban, and anyone who calls it a Muslim ban either knows nothing about the issue or is being willfully disingenuous. Because if you look at the text of the executive order, it doesn't mention any religion. It mentions a list of states that were selected by the Obama administration because they have failed or failing central governments, and there's no means of actually vetting from central governments. This is not anything that's specifically targeting a religion, despite the efforts to make people believe that it is a quote-unquote Muslim ban. Now, I think that the protesting is actually going to be self-defeating, because I would defy you to find anyone at any of these airports, which are all in blue cities, where they missed their flight, they were delayed or something, who were like, you know what, now I support this, as opposed to people who were like, you know what, I wasn't sure about this, but
well, let me get to
I'm
the
no
first
longer
part
a
of what
fan.
you said and have Sylvia address that. Sylvia, what about this argument that this is not a Muslim ban, that it's not designed to discriminate against
Well,
a
I think
religion?
the White House and the White House press secretary still can't even keep it straight in his own mind as to whether or not it's a ban. He's chastised the media for calling it a ban, but then he goes on national news and starts to call it a ban. So I don't think they're clear. I also think that the executive order was sloppily written and even more sloppily executed. We're seeing, we're going back and forth, are permanent residents part of the ban or not, right? And you're right, it's not targeting exclusively Muslims, because we've seen some people who have put their life on the line, protecting our country through translation in some of these countries, who are not being allowed to enter the country. And we know that the permanent residency process and the vetting process for people to get a visa is very, very thorough. Let's call it what it is. This is another means to divide the nation, to incite fear, hate, and bigotry.
Some of the folks who are coming in are, in fact, refugees. And Miriam, their supporters are suggesting that the vetting process is already fairly extensive, that it takes, for example, for a Syrian refugee, about 2 years in order to be approved to come into the country.
Oh, absolutely. And I've actually spoken with Syrian refugees who it took them 4 to 5 years. They were in refugee camps and they had to wait to get vetted and then go through so many processes and be interviewed in Jordan, for example, before they were able to come here. And on top of that, I mean, I just wanted to go back about the Muslim ban, whether it's a Muslim ban or not. I mean, ironically, if we are trying to vet people and we're trying to make sure that danger doesn't come to the United States, then why are we only focusing on Muslim majority countries and then perhaps also Mexico versus, let's go to Norway. Anders Breivik killed 77 people, but we're not blocking Norwegians from coming to the United States.
Or let's even look at just the range. I mean, you have much more likelihood of being killed by someone who is U.S. born with all the gun violence that we've seen escalate over recent years than you have of someone who comes from, quote unquote, one of these countries.
Jeff, you wanted to jump in here.
Yeah, despite the efforts to make people believe that this is a Muslim ban, there is nothing. If you read the text of the executive order, it does not mention any religion.
Doesn't matter if it's a Muslim ban or not. The fact is that we're excluding people who have been vetted, who have permanent residency, who have visas from coming to this country, just to incite more fear and nativism in this nation.
I will stipulate that the rollout was botched. It was not well coordinated and all that kind of good stuff.
That's the next thing I want to get to. I mean, we could debate the semantics all night long, but in terms of the pure competence, where people are separated from their families, where scientists and students are sent back on 12-hour flights and where nobody in the administration, outside of a very few, seemed to know what was going on. What about the execution of this?
Well, I think we're certainly seeing Trump's executive orders playing out, and we're seeing the degree of his competence and incompetence, right? I mean, just the fact that there's been such inconsistency that they did not think through what does this mean for students, what does this mean for people who are permanent residents, is just another way of, I think the big picture of inciting fear is really dominating what should be a safe, orderly process for the execution of any policy that's going to be implemented.
Jeff, do you agree that the implementation of this was basically, as the Wall Street Journal said, bungled?
So we're 12 days into the Trump administration. He's still trying to get his cabinet secretaries confirmed over obstruction for the Democrats.
He's had months to think about this. He's been saying this all through the election. I can't imagine that he was just starting to think about it as he came in 12 days ago.
I like how you're, interpreting something besides the statutory text of the executive order, which is what matters, right?
Well,
is the text of what was written.
Rudy Giuliani himself said, Trump asked me, how can we put together a Muslim ban? He came out and said it publicly.
So what does the executive order say? So I mean, this is hearsay.
Well,
right?
one of the things,
that's not hearsay. That's Rudy Giuliani.
Let me just jump in here for a minute. Let's get beyond the semantics, because part of the legal debate is going to be and has been the intent, beside what is written exactly in the order, and that is why Attorney General Lisa Madigan has joined 15 attorneys general in supporting this in court. And Mary, in terms of the legal process of this, do you think Madigan was right?
I think so, absolutely. I think that we need to be supportive of immigrants and their rights to come to this country. We are all immigrants if we look back into our family history, unless you're native born, from the people that were here 500 years ago. So I think that that's a first step. I don't know how well it's going to play out in the end, though.
Jeff, what about the intent, going beyond the specific wording? We heard about Giuliani. We heard certainly Donald Trump throughout the campaign say he was going to implement a Muslim ban. Now the attorneys general are jumping in. Do you see this basically being litigated all the way to the Supreme Court?
Well, actually, if you look at it, this is actually a step down from the rhetoric that people were worried about in the campaign, because it's not a Muslim ban. It's not, and it's a temporary policy for the next 120 days. Again, Trump doesn't even have his cabinet agencies
appointed. What about Madigan's fight here?
It's a holdover for them to actually be able to figure out what's going on.
Why don't they wait then? Why don't they issue this executive order in 6 months? Why did they do it now if they're not
Why
ready?
did the Obama administration increase the number of refugees from 50,000, which is a historical average, to more than double that?
Why because there's a crisis. Because there's a crisis.
And the crisis has been happening. Nobody was talking about this.
There have been no acts of terrorism committed by any people that have come from these countries. So I don't know what you mean when you say crisis.
When the Obama administration was sitting idly by as 400,000 Syrians were killed by Assad, there was no, uproar about this. All of a sudden, there's a Republican president, and now it's, we need to deal with this.
There were uproars. I don't know what social media you've been watching, but obviously
All right, let's move on to another subject, but related to the Attorney General, Lisa Madigan. She is asking a court here in Illinois to freeze the pay of Illinois legislators until a budget deal can be reached. Sylvia, is this the correct approach?
Well, here's what I think about this. I'm really taken aback by the governor saying that she is creating a crisis. Governor, the crisis has been going for 19 months now. We've seen 1 million people from Illinois not receive basic services. We've seen homeless shelters close. We've seen domestic abuse continue because we have an ongoing crisis because our legislature, the governor, and the legislative leadership and all of our legislators have not done their job.
Is not getting paid pretty decent decent leverage for Madigan to use in order to get the two sides to some kind of
It's
deal.
clearly leverage, right? And
Mary,
she certainly is calling the bluff on saying you haven't done your job for 19 months. She's not got a sound legal argument. We can't allow this situation to continue. It's way past time for all of our electeds to do their job.
What do you think, Mary?
I think if I wasn't getting paid, I'd sure do something real quick about that. So I think that her saying that will put people on their toes. But again, I feel like we've heard these threats before. I don't know that it's necessarily going to come true.
And let's hear Governor Rauner wasn't very happy, of course, with Madigan's request in court. Let's hear what he had to say.
I hope this is not a direct attempt to cause a crisis, to force a shutdown of the government, to force another stopgap spending plan, short-term, unbalanced, incomplete, as a step to force a tax hike without any changes to our broken system. I hope that's not what this is.
Jeff, what do you think Rauner is up to here? Do you think that he's worried that this is going to essentially force a tax hike in Illinois?
Well, we talk about 19 months. This has been a problem. Before the November election, Speaker Madigan and Leader Cullerton had supermajorities in both houses of the Illinois legislature. If they really wanted to pass a budget, they could have done it. They could have done it they could have overridden the veto of Governor Rauner. They didn't do it, right? Now they lose the supermajority in the House, and suddenly it's this is Governor Rauner being obstructionist when they had the opportunity to do it. So this is typical political games. I don't know if you guys saw, but the Illinois Policy Institute released a paper of how we can actually fix the state of Illinois without tax increases, because this is always the hang-up, that Madigan wants more tax increases, and enough's enough.
There are certainly ways to address this issue by doing other kinds of things besides just a tax increase. I actually agree with you there. But I think for the governor to say that Attorney General has caused this crisis is disingenuous. Again, it's
right.
all...
Madigan caused the crisis 19 months ago.
Well, if this order, which let's say it does go through, and we don't know yet because the judge hasn't ruled, if it does stop paychecks, is this the kind of thing, Miriam, that could lead to some kind of a deal?
Well, I think if it goes beyond the legislators and it goes to state employees in general, I think you'll have a huge strikes and protests, and I think that will cause something to happen.
Well, it clearly escalates what needs to happen because reasonable people are not doing their job, and that's what the unfortunate thing is, that thousands and tens of thousands of Illinois citizens continue to be impacted by the existing crisis. Autism services not being provided, homeless shelters closing, and we are becoming numb to the crisis that already exists here in Illinois.
And we've had another downgrade here from the rating service,
Which is
Fitch.
nothing new.
It's new, but it's the latest one, and now I think we're 50 out of 50. Let me just read what Fitch had to say. The downgrade reflects the unprecedented failure of the state to enact a full budget for 2 consecutive years and the financial implications of spending far in excess of available revenues. Miriam, yet another downgrade from a bond agency. This means the interest that Illinois pays on everything goes up. Right. Is this going to create some pressure?
It should create pressure, but unfortunately, I think what we have when we see Governor Rauner is we have another Trump in our midst. We have a businessman who got elected to office and is running things like a business, and it doesn't work.
I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I think that is the tactic that Madigan and the Democrats in Illinois, which again, by Fitch's own statement, this has been a crisis for multiple years. Madigan and Cullerton had supermajorities. They could have changed this if they were so inclined, and yet they didn't. Why? Maybe because they benefit from the status quo. Maybe because they don't actually care about Illinois residents, and maybe because it helps them increase their own personal power.
Well, right now we're not seeing much leadership in the General Assembly to resolve this crisis from any quarters.
In the meantime, if you went shopping this week, you paid 7 cents more on every shopping bag, whether it was paper or plastic. Miriam, what do you think about this?
First of all, I want to know what happened to the original plastic bag ban. I remember going to the store about a year or so ago, and they said, we're getting rid of plastic bags. Came back the next day, and they were thicker, heavier duty plastic bags. I was thinking, who got the contract for that? But I think people are going to be upset. They're not going to want to pay. I'm more inclined to use reusable bags. Let's hope that these taxes do something for the city.
Jeff, how about you? Are you bringing those reusable bags into the store now?
Actually, I'm more likely to shop in the suburbs, and I think many people are too. This is a stupid policy intended that will actually end up hurting the poorest of us, so that the richest of us can virtue signal to say, look, we're doing something for the environment by slapping poor people with a 7 cent per bag tax.
But let's call it what it is. It's another way of the city nickel and diming the residents of Chicago to raise taxes. I know I'm going to carry my stack of reusable bags around with me, and I agree with you. I think it is disproportionately impacting the poor and the poorest and those who can least afford it.
I'm glad to see that agreement, by the way.
Well, why don't we just get rid of plastic bags altogether and just have reusable bags for everybody?
I don't understand. I mean, it's the amount of energy, if you care about truly the environmental aspect, the amount of energy to actually create one of these reusable bags outstrips the disposable bags by 100 times. You need to use a bag
100 times?
Yes.
I'm glad you told me that. I'm going to start keeping count.
On that note, we are running out of time. But thanks to our guests, Miriam Sobe, Jeff Holm, and Sylvia Puente. Medical marijuana in Illinois. Why is the state one of the most regulated in the country? Lauren Cohn is here to tell us more.
Thanks, Chris. Illinois has seen a huge jump in the use of medical cannabis. Approved applications have increased more than fourfold since the beginning of 2016. But a debate over the proper use of medical cannabis is still raging. 29-year-old Chicagoan Felisa Castro has lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease with no cure.
I first found out I had lupus in 2009. I had lesions that were forming on my face. I didn't know why. I kept going to the doctor and they kept misdiagnosing me.
Castro went into seclusion and says the strong drugs prescribed only made her feel more sick and depressed, so she turned to cannabis for help.
It was definitely an immediate improvement, but it wasn't some like miraculous physical benefit. It wasn't like all of a sudden my lesions were gone and I was cured. It was like all of a sudden I felt better overall, just about my overall condition. I felt like I wanted to eat, like my stomach felt better.
Castro was one of the first medical cannabis patients in Illinois. She says her condition improved so significantly she decided to open the Healing Clinic on Chicago's North Side to help others learn about the program. To qualify, a patient must have one of 39 conditions, be able to show current medical records, proof of residency, age, have a photo ID, undergo a federal background check, and pay an application fee. There are more than 12 million people living in Illinois, but only about 15,000 patients are registered in the state.
There's a lack of awareness. I think that many patients don't know that the program exists, that medical cannabis is a viable treatment option. I mean, doctors aren't really talking about it.
Dr. Jonathan Spiro is the certifying physician at the Healing Clinic. He says most doctors aren't educated about cannabis, and even he was skeptical at first. But after doing extensive research and working with patients, he's convinced it helps people live more comfortable lives.
It's remarkable how beneficial cannabis can be for so many different conditions. I always like to say that if we'd never discovered medical cannabis or cannabis in general, and someone went into the Amazon and found it, they'd probably get a Nobel Prize for medicine because it's that powerful.
Last year, Governor Rauner expanded the medical cannabis program to include PTSD and terminal illness. Dr. Aaron Weiner, Director of Addiction Services at Linden Oaks Behavioral Health in west suburban Naperville, Illinois, says using cannabis can make some conditions worse, and he was shocked by the move.
If you start smoking cannabis to help with symptoms of PTSD, you're going to still have PTSD, but you're also on the road to developing an addiction. And even in addition to that, what getting intoxicated does is it allows you to avoid your experiences, it allows you to avoid your feelings. And a huge part of therapy for PTSD is connecting with those and resolving those.
Dr. Weiner says there is limited evidence that cannabis helps patients, which is why he believes doctors are hesitant. He sees the program as more of a business opportunity, and he's especially concerned about the marketing towards children.
People are pouncing on it and developing vape pens, for example, that kids can conceal in backpacks, that are making gummy bears, that are making products that are aimed clearly at children, because 90% of addictions start when you're a teenager.
Illinois now has 51 dispensaries and 21 cultivation centers. The state's program remains one of the most regulated in the country. Shay Evans is director of patient and physician outreach at Modern Cannabis in Chicago's Logan Square neighborhood. She also suffers from lupus and says her life has dramatically changed for the better using cannabis. She applauds the tight security and strict rules.
In other states, patients can go and shop from dispensary to dispensary, whereas in Illinois, you can designate any dispensary that you would like. However, if you'd like to go and purchase from a dispensary, you need to designate to that one. It's just to help tighten down on our dispensing of product to make sure that nobody goes over their limit, and the traditional limit of a patient is 2.5 ounces every 14 days.
The state also makes sure all products are tracked from seed to sale so patients know exactly what they are getting. 2 years ago, when the medical cannabis program began, Illinois State Police increased field training for all officers. That included a series of steps to better recognize what an impaired driver looks like, whether alcohol or drugs are involved.
The final test we're going to do is a one-leg stand test. 1001, 1002.
But the impact of medical cannabis on road safety remains unclear.
Right now, we just have the overall stats of number of DUI arrests in total compared to previous years, and there's no specific data right now that I have to show that there's an increase in marijuana-related DUIs over this year other than prior years.
A recent Gallup poll shows 60% of Americans support the legal use of marijuana. According to a 2016 study conducted by the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, 4 in 5 Illinois voters support medicinal cannabis, but less than half support legalization for recreational use.
Whether we'll go recreational, people ask me that all the time. I think we're further behind the recreational states.
With limited broad data and scientific evidence, it's more likely Illinois will continue to focus on its medical cannabis program, which expires in 2020.
And Lauren Cohn is joining us now. Lauren, for the average patient in Illinois, how much do they spend on this?
It's actually expensive. It's $400 a month is what they're spending, which is a lot.
It is. And do they get any of the money reimbursed by insurance companies?
No, that's part of the problem. It's not covered by insurance. And what's also interesting in terms of just dollars and cents here is that these businesses that generate money, the cultivators, the dispensaries, none of that money can be put into the majority of banks because it's still not legal on the federal level. So there's a huge security issue with all of this.
And I know the state treasurer is trying to get the Trump administration to clarify this so that people can actually use the banks, right?
Right, it's very confusing even in states where there's legalization. Then there's, even more of a security issue like Colorado and California.
One of the things that this legalization was supposed to do was bring more revenue into Illinois. How much tax revenue is being generated?
So right now, tax revenue, the first year of the program was $700,000. The second year, it was a little over $1 million. So there was a jump.
So a little bit of money is always a good thing, and Illinois, as we know, is in bad shape. But is it significant? I mean, how does it compare to the other states that are bringing in tax money?
Right, so if you look at a state like Colorado where they have legalization, they brought in last year $1 billion in sales, translating into $135 million in tax revenue.
Real money, which we don't have. Is there any talk now in Springfield of maybe legalizing this more than just medical marijuana?
I think because we're so strict legalization, we would be one of the last states, if ever. The big talk is really what happens with the medical cannabis program, which expires in 2020, and we also have to see if they even expand the list of medical conditions.
So for people who are hoping for a Colorado-like marketplace, unlikely here. Right?
Move. I would say just move out of Illinois.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Lauren Cohn. That wraps up this week's show. You are now in the loop. To find out more about today's guest and our stories, log into our website, wycc.org, and click on In the Loop. Until next week, for Lauren Cohn, I'm Chris Bury.